Hey everyone, Fusion 360 Evangelist Taylor Stein here, and in this video we're going to be looking at sketch constraints. In Fusion 360, whenever you've been sketching, you've probably seen these constraints that show up here in the sketch palette, and in this video we're going to be walking through each of them, showing how they work and really what they do. First up, let's take a look at the coincident constraint. This constraint applies a position continuity between the two objects that I select. I'll select the center point of this circle and this line, and you'll see that the coincident constraint shows up. If I click and drag on this point, you'll see that it has to stay on the line, or really the infinite extension of this line. I can also apply a coincident constraint between 2 points. I'll choose the coincident constraint, choose this point and this point right here, and now when I click and drag on the point, I'm not only changing the position of the circle, but really the location of the endpoint of that line. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Next up, we have the collinear constraint. What this does is not only make two lines parallel, but make them share one common line. To see what I mean, I'll choose the collinear constraint, choose this side of this rectangle, and choose this line. You'll see that now not only are they parallel, but they share that one common line. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have concentric. This constraint can be applied between circles and arcs. What it does is it really aligns the center point of both circular objects that you pick. I'll go ahead and choose the concentric constraint, and let's choose this circle and this arc right here. You'll see that now as I click and drag on this circle, I can change its size, but the center of the circle now has to remain right at the center of this arc. Next up, we have the midpoint constraint, and this can be applied between a few different objects. I'll go ahead and choose the midpoint constraint, and you'll see that I can apply it between a point and a line, and now this point has to remain at the midpoint of this line. If I click and drag on this line to change its length, that point isn't going anywhere, it has to stay right at the middle. I can also apply a midpoint constraint between two lines. I'll choose this side of this rectangle and this line right here, and you'll see that now the midpoints of both of those lines are aligned. It doesn't necessarily make these two lines collinear, but I can do that if I want by using the collinear constraint that we saw earlier. I'll go ahead and choose that and pick this line, and now we have them sharing midpoints and aligned that way. Additionally, I can apply again a midpoint constraint between a point and a line, so I can choose midpoint and choose this point and this line. And now this line segment has to terminate at the midpoint of this line. So if I click and drag over here, the angle may not be set, but that endpoint is really stuck at the midpoint of the other line, even if its length changes as well. Next up, we have fix or unfix. What this does is really lock in place or free up whatever geometry you select. I'll go ahead and first apply a coincident constraint between the endpoint of this line and this circle, and so that now I have that coincident constraint in place. If I were to click and drag on this point, you'll see that I'm changing not only the location of the endpoint of this line, but also the size and location of this circle. If I don't want that and I want the circle to stay in place, what I can do is use the fix constraint. I'll go ahead and select the circle and then choose fix, and you'll see that it's now green. Now if I click and drag on the endpoint of this line, you'll see that nothing happens to the circle, but I can change the position of this line much easier. Next up is the parallel constraint. This one's not too tricky. All it does is it makes the two lines that you select parallel. Let's go ahead and make this line right here parallel with this green one that I fixed earlier. So to do that, I'll choose parallel, choose this line and this fixed line right here, and now both of them are parallel. Next up, we have perpendicular, and just like parallel, this one's not too complicated. It makes the two objects that you select perpendicular or really just meet at a 90-degree angle. Let's go ahead and choose perpendicular over here, and I'll choose this line and this top line of this rectangle, and you'll see that they're now perpendicular. No matter where I position this line, it has to remain perfectly perpendicular to this line over here. If I want it to actually touch this line, I'll have to apply another constraint. I'll choose a coincident constraint and choose this point right here and this line. Now they meet at a right angle and they have to touch. Next up, we have horizontal/vertical, which is one of the constraints that I use most inside of Fusion 360. What this constraint does is make the two objects that you select either horizontal or vertical based on whatever is closest. To see what I mean, I'll go ahead and choose horizontal/vertical, and I'll choose this point right here and this point, and we'll see that they become horizontal. I can also apply this horizontal constraint to a line, so if I pick this line over here, now that line has to be horizontal. So I can adjust the location of this circle, move everything up and down, but all three of these objects here have to remain horizontal from each other. I can also choose the same horizontal/vertical constraint over here, and if I choose this point and this point, they become vertical from each other, and that's because those 2 points are closer to vertical than they are horizontal. Next up, we have the tangent constraint. This is really similar to the coincident constraint, but 1 degree further. Instead of just positioning two things together, it makes sure that they have one continuous surface between them. To see what I mean, I'll go ahead and choose the tangent constraint, and I'll choose this circle and this line, and now they're tangent. If I were to change the size of the circle, you'll see that the rectangle beneath it adjusts so that you have one smooth transition over here. I can also apply this relationship from this line over here to this circle. Go ahead and choose tangent, and I can choose this line and this circle. And now when I move this line around, you'll see that it has to always remain tangent, meaning that it just touches the circle at one single point. Next up is the smooth constraint, which is very similar to the tangent constraint, but applies even a smoother transition between the objects. This is also referred to as G2 continuity. To see what I mean, I'll start by drawing a spline and connect it from this point over here to this point right here. Now it might just look like a line, but these handles can adjust to make everything smooth. I'll choose the smooth constraint and choose this line, and also choose this line and this line. Now not only do I have G1 tangency between these curves, but I have G2 curvature continuity between all these curves. Next up, we have the equal constraint. What this does is really make any objects that you have the same size. Instead of dimensioning all of these circles to be the same size, we can use the equal constraint on them. To start off, I'll just apply it between two circles. I'll choose the equal constraint, choose one circle and another one over here, and you'll see that now they're the same size and I have this equal constraint icon show up. If I change the size of these, both of them adjust accordingly. I can also select multiple objects before choosing the equal constraint. So let's go ahead and choose these three circles right here, choose the equal constraint, and now you'll see that if I adjust any of these, they all change in size as well. Now they're ready for me to add a dimension to one of them. So if I were to dimension this circle right here to be 40 millimeters, you'll see that they all adjust to be 40. Next up, we have the symmetry constraint. What this does is it makes two objects that you select symmetrical about a third object that you select. If I want to position this rectangle right at the middle of this other rectangle, there's a few ways I could do it. I could do it the way before, where I apply a midpoint constraint between this line right here and this point, or I could also use a symmetry constraint. Let's go ahead and do that. I can choose symmetry and choose two objects, so I'll choose this line and this line, and now I can choose a third line that's really the line of symmetry. You'll see that now if I click and drag on this rectangle, it has to stay symmetric about this green line of symmetry down the middle. Lastly, if I want to position these together, I can go ahead and apply another midpoint constraint between this line right here and this one as well. So there are all the constraints that you can apply inside of Fusion 360. There's also a few more tricks that I wanted to show. One thing you'll notice is that if you have sketch geometry already selected, you have certain constraints that can be applied or not. You'll see that if I select this circle right here, some of the constraints become grayed out because I can't use them. Making a circle parallel to anything doesn't make any sense, so it doesn't let me select it. You'll see that if I select a line over here, I also have different options. Additionally, if you have two items selected, the list refines even more. So with a line and a circle selected, I really only have a few choices, tangent or fixed. And also, instead of selecting the constraints here in the sketch palette, if you have two objects selected, you can also right-click, and you'll see that here in the marking menu, I'm given a list of constraints that I can apply between the two objects that I've selected. I'll go ahead and choose the tangent constraint, and you'll see that now these two objects are tangent to each other. So there you have it. Those are sketch constraints inside of Fusion 360. Hopefully you have a better grasp on the concept and can start to utilize these as you're sketching out your designs. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. And as always, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can always tweet me at Taylor_Stein. Thanks for watching.